Okay, so hopefully everyone can see my screen here. We are going to just give you kind of a brief overview of the program in case you haven't had a chance to watch the training video, but we will refer you to that today too. So I'm going to go through some slides here for about the first 10 minutes, and then we'll open it up for questions. I will not be monitoring the chat box while I'm presenting, but if you do have questions, you can go ahead and drop those in, and we'll get to them after these slides. So you're here to talk about the Resilient Food Systems Infrastructure Grant Program. So what is the Resilient Food System Infrastructure Grant? So this is a USDA sponsored program. This is not a state initiative or coming from any state general funds. I think that's an important distinction. People have had a lot of questions about that. So this is a federal program. It is a cooperative agreement that each state has with the USDA. And so the funding that's available in this program has already been predetermined by the USDA based on a formula of state receipts based on the eligible crops under this program or the eligible products under this program. So the funding that ODA has is predetermined. And this is, as far as we know, one-time funding. So I just wanted to make sure that that was clear. And so the Resilient Food System Infrastructure Grant Program is really designed, I'm going to back up here for a moment, but really designed to support the middle of the supply chain with infrastructure projects and equipment that these players may need to source more Oregon products. So it's really meant for aggregators, processors, distributors, even warehousing facilities. Really what the USDA is wanting to see with this grant program is that it's somewhat in response to some of the supply chain disruption that we saw during the COVID pandemic. And what they would like to do is actually build more resiliency in the middle of the supply chain so that when and if another crisis like that happens, local and regional food systems are strong and able to respond. So, so some of what they would like to see is that what's needed in the middle of the supply chain is achieved with these funds, and it gives the opportunity for some of the small and emerging producers and food businesses to get their products picked up by the middle of the supply chain. So these are some of the allowable products under the grant program. So any specialty crops that are edible. So fruits and vegetables, tree nuts, some of the edible flowers, nursery crops and herbs that are edible are allowable under this project. Dairy products, any grains for human consumption, aquaculture. There are some other food product areas, but one thing that's important to note about this grant program is that it does exclude meat and poultry and also wild-caught seafood. And so I'm sure there's going to be some questions about that, and especially if you have mixed operations and you're handling both eligible products as well as ineligible ones, we can talk to you about that today too. So there are two tracks under this grant program. Right now we have opened up the infrastructure track first. We will be opening up a simplified equipment only track in February, on February 1st. So right now we're only talking about the infrastructure grant. I'm going to give you just a few details about the equipment one. But essentially, the range of applications can be anywhere from $100,000 to $2 million for the infrastructure grant track. And these projects can be completed within a 3-year grant period or less. There is a 25 to 50% matching requirement, which we can talk about today if people have questions about that tiered matching, because there are some requirements that applicants need to meet for that reduced match, for that 25%. And again, the projects must expand the capacity in the middle of the supply chain by building or installing equipment that can support processing more Oregon product. And then the equipment only track, which will open in February, you can see the range of applications that we're looking for from 10,000 to 100,000. And this can be for equipment only. So that really restricts that grant program to only purchasing equipment. Any installation of that equipment or training on how to use that equipment would not be allowed under that grant program. So it's only simply just purchasing the equipment and receiving it. That grant program has a little bit shorter time period. That's a 1-year grant commitment. There is no matching requirement. It still must be equipment used for any activities or processing, aggregation, et cetera, in the middle of the supply chain. So both of these tracks are specifically for post-harvest or post-farm gate activities. So anyway, these are a little bit more details about how the program will run in Oregon. So I mentioned that there are 2 different track programs. They'll have 2 different time periods. So the infrastructure projects will run on a 3-year grant program. We anticipate, hopefully, once we get our proposed state plan for those grant applications into USDA, that we'll get those back hopefully by the end of summer or early fall, so that those projects can start. So once you have a fully executed contract with ODA, those projects can begin. And we have heard from USDA that we need to complete those. All those funds need to be, or those projects need to be completed by January 1st, 2027. There will be some reporting requirements under the infrastructure grant track. So there will be a progress report and probably expenditure workbooks that are due to show how you've spent down those funds. And that will be twice yearly under that track. And then I won't go into detail about the equipment one because that one is not open yet, but there will be some reporting. And it is a 1-year grant program. One thing I did want to say is that with both of these grant programs, they will be disbursement based initially. So you will receive some of the funds basically at the outset of the project. And that's really to help address some of what we've heard from a lot of industry, is that having that upfront capital or having those resources, liquid resources, is difficult for a lot of under-resourced producers. So we are making this a disbursement grant initially. There may be, I'm not going to get into too much of the details, but some of it may act as a reimbursement just depending on your cash flow. So, but at least initially you'll have that infusion of funds when your project starts. There will be an advisory committee that's going to be reviewing these proposals. This is made up of 15 different members of the middle of the supply chain industry and experts in the state that will be working with us to review applications. And here's the funding breakdown. So Oregon did get an allotment of $5.9 million. 2.8 of that is reserved for infrastructure projects, 1.2 for equipment, and then $1 million is being held back for state-led initiatives that will support these projects over the duration, and hopefully in the long term as well, beyond after the grant ends. These are some of the priority sort of areas or project areas for infrastructure that USDA has given us guidance on. I'm not going to go through each of these, but it is helpful just to see kind of the overarching expectation of USDA and how the funds are used. I think probably bullet 2 is the one that's is most is kind of the umbrella for how they see these funds being spent. So expanding the capacity of the locally and regionally produced food products in one or more of the following ways: aggregation, processing, manufacturing, storing, transporting, wholesaling, and or distribution. So if you are part of any of those middle of the supply chain activities, and you are doing those with the allowable products, you would be eligible or well suited for this grant. There are some other non sort of infrastructure, hard infrastructure allowable activities too. So trainings, enhancing worker safety. So training and education in particular for how to use new infrastructure installations or equipment that you're going to be purchasing would be allowable under this infrastructure grant. Any new, for example, like food safety plans or operational plans and implementing those, and any updated technology that might be necessary for those changes would be allowable as well. Wastewater management structures, and then some of the other, there are some that are related to USDA's climate action goals. So if you're going to be installing equipment or building infrastructure that would improve air and water quality or meet some of their climate goals, those are also eligible projects under this grant. And then other goals identified by the Northwest Rocky Mountain Food Business Center. And so I'm going to talk about the Business Center really briefly after these slides so I can show you what those 4 goals are. Oops. All right, so what is our timeline? So the RFA is currently open for the infrastructure grant that opened January 1st. You can see that it closes on February 29th, 2024. And these are some important dates related to actually both of these tracks. But on the table there, you see we are hosting a number of office hours throughout January. And then after the both grants close, the applications will be sent to our review committee around the week of March 8th. And then, they'll be working over the next month and reading proposals and scoring proposals and then preparing recommendations that will go up to the director's office. And the directors will be selecting those awardees the week of April 30th. And hopefully we'll be notifying applicants that their proposal has been selected to be submitted to USDA for approval in early May. And then hopefully those will be going off to USDA by the end of May. And then, we anticipate hopefully that our proposal will be, the state plan will be approved, and that selected applicants can start working on their projects sometime in August or early fall. Okay, application process. So once the applications come in to ODA, they will basically there'll be a screening phase where internally ODA will review those for allowability and completeness, making sure all the paperwork has been submitted, and that that the applicants are actually eligible and their projects are eligible to be reviewed by the review committee. So program staff will be doing that portion of the review process. And then those that are eligible for review will be going to the review committee, and the review committee will have score sheets, which I believe you do have access to see what those score sheets are, and so how your project will be evaluated and the merits of your project will be determined by the committee. And so they will be filling out those score sheets and giving any comments about the competitiveness of your proposals. And then stage 3 is ODA leadership selection. So the director's office will select those final candidates for awardship. And a lot of the information that the director's office will be using will come from the review committee, but they will also be using other priorities of the agency, such as representation around the state. So there'll be an interest by the agency in making sure that there's good geographic distribution of the funds. And then once those are selected and determined, they move on to USDA for final review. So the required documents, and again, we can talk more about this today. I'm sure some of you have had a chance to actually look at the application itself, but there's a couple of cover pages that gather information about the applicant. Then there's the proposal itself. There's also A couple of requirements under the infrastructure grant. Well, attachment A, the critical resource and infrastructure letter, typically, or it's not necessarily a requirement, but I imagine a lot of you will be submitting that letter. And then attachment B would be the matching funds verification. So, you do have to meet the 25 or 50% matching requirement for the infrastructure program. And those letters need to be completed by whatever entities are going to be helping you achieve that match. The critical resource and infrastructure letter is really designed for identifying. So, for example, if you don't own a facility, but you are renting a facility in which some of these activities would be taking place, you would need the owner of this building or facility to complete this critical resource letter on your behalf, basically stating that you are going to have access to this facility during the duration of the project, and that it's going to be available for the use of to you during the duration. So. And so we do need to have these critical resource letters completed if you are going to be using resources that are owned by others. And you can use that towards, some of those you'll be able to use towards your match requirements as well. All right. And then these, if you have questions, I imagine a lot of you have been sending questions to the Resilient System Grant email address. That's our general inbox for this grant program. If you haven't, please use this email address. That's how we're monitoring questions that are coming in. And then if you'd like to receive this this PowerPoint, you can put your email address in the chat box. We'll make sure to send you this as well. And then we also have, I am going to kind of switch over here to some links that we think are really helpful to have for reviewing the requirements of the grant. So let's see. So this is and we can send this out as well to those of you that would like it if you just drop your email address in the chat box. But this is our main RFSI website here. So let's see. Oh, it actually looks like that link might be broken. So I'm going to show it to you differently. Let's see. We'll fix that and send it back out. All right. So when you click on that link, this is our main Resilient Food System Infrastructure Grant page. And everything that you need to apply for this grant is going to be on this page. So you really want to spend some time here and read through this. A lot of it I covered really briefly in that presentation, but I really wanted to draw your attention to the application training video. This is a pre-recorded video that Gabrielle created, and it goes into basically a lot of detail, a lot of questions you probably have about the grant were covered in this training video. So we really encourage you to watch this, and if you have questions after you watch this, to contact us. But the training video does go kind of step by step through the application and answers a lot of questions. So I just wanted to make sure you knew where to find this. So it is at the top of the RFSI main page on the ODA website. And then if you page down, you will find at the bottom all of the materials that you will need here to apply for the grant. So the request for applications, which gives you a lot of detail about what the application's looking for, the application template. Here's another link to the training video in case you lose it, and those required letters that I spoke about. This information, we have everything available in English, Spanish, and Swahili as well. However, not the application. So if you do need help with, or you know someone that does need help with language translation, please contact us. We've had a few of those requests and we're working to support those applicants. And then I did mention the regional food business centers. And so I wanted to make sure that, let's see, did I pull that one up? I wanted to make sure that we talked about really briefly what those centers are. So these are 12 different centers around the country that have been recently established, pretty much at the same time that the USDA announced the RFSI funding. They announced the existence of these regional food business centers, and they are essentially virtual or geographic centers. So there are many organizations, state agencies, and partners that are involved in the Northwest and Rocky Mountain Regional Food Business Center, which is where Oregon is obviously located and part of this regional center. And so there are basically 4 key priorities of the center. You can see them here under this tab. This is also in that links document that I just shared with you, and this will get you to the same page. But the centers are going to be working over the next 5 years to develop technical assistance and resources around these 4 different areas: building animal protein supply, creating diverse markets for climate resilient agriculture, connecting and scaling food entrepreneurs, and then supporting investing in these areas. So if your projects are going to align with any of these high priority areas, you can indicate that in your application. And so we can answer some questions about that if you have them today. All right, so yes, in this document, so here's the request for applications. The one thing I will say about this is that, actually, that's not what I'm looking for the actual application, but this will take you to the request for applications where you can read a lot of the details about what's required for the grant. Again, here's that application training video that's super important. And then we do have a facts page on our website, and we're actually updating that with a couple of additions today. But that's really good to kind of look through as well when you have questions. Maybe before you reach out to us, go ahead and check out the facts page because there's lots of commonly asked questions listed there. Okay, so I think I'm going to just stop there and kind of open it up. I've been chatting quite a bit, and I think I've covered most of what I wanted to, and we can always come back to some of these documents, but I'm going to just go ahead and open up the call for questions. So looks like so far there are not any questions in the chat box, just emails, and people would like links to pages and the slides, please. Yep, we can do that. All right, let's see, I see some raised hands. So why don't we start with Ben? Go ahead.
Thanks, Amy. That was really helpful overview. And I had a question on the equipment only grant and was curious about equipment as it pertains to being attached to buildings. So, for example, overhead doors, loading dock equipment and lifts, do those kind of things, are they allowable? And what I heard is one can just pay for the equipment and not the installation. But because, would they be allowable in cases where they're attached to a building?
The equipment itself would be allowable, but the installation of it to the, attaching it to the building, or, if there was going to be a gate or a lift that was attached, those costs would not be allowed to be requested.
That's clear.
In fact,
thanks so much.
That would be more of an infrastructure grant request. But that wouldn't, yeah, I mean, we're mostly answering questions about the infrastructure grant, so I just want to make sure you are asking about the equipment only track, correct?
Yeah, that's correct. And just as it seems like sometimes, like with that kind of thing, it could go in either bucket, whether it's you're paying just for the equipment or whether you're really rolling in some attached things into infrastructure. But yeah, it seems like I think that the answer was helpful because it seems like in those cases, we were just wondering if it would make sense to pursue the equipment grant in lieu of the infrastructure grant for those kind of things.
Got it. Okay. All right, lots of hands coming up here. Let's go to Jasmine. Jasmine, we can't hear you. Are you speaking? We can't hear you. Do you want to, okay, we're going to come back to you. All right, Casey.
Can you hear me?
Yes, can hear you.
Great. A couple questions. What's the cap size? I saw a small, medium enterprise. What's the medium max size, or how is that defined?
There's no, can you be more specific? You mean on applying for the grant?
Correct.
There's no cap size on the size of your business to apply for the grant.
Okay. And then are there, I guess, related, there are no adjusted gross income limits through USDA for that?
No.
Okay. And then a final question for a new development, would you need permits and plans fully hashed out and in hand, or could they be in process?
I think if you have a permit that's waiting in a, at the county land use office, or if you can at least, if someone can verify that for you by either writing a letter, or you can give a, you can even refer to that ticket number, so that we know that's actually established, that it is in process, and the timeline of when that will be. I know permitting can be difficult to nail down in terms of when it might happen, but the more information you can give about where that permit application is in process, I think the better. Rather than just simply mentioning it, you might want to provide those details, or even have the land use planner referred to in your application, and the ticket number.
Fantastic. Thank you. Thanks, Amy.
Casey, this is Gabrielle Ugaldi here from the Oregon Department of Agriculture. It is not required that you have those items before you apply. As Amy mentioned, it's always better to have them beforehand, but any costs that you expend prior to receiving your award, you cannot ask for reimbursement for. However, the grant can pay for permits, architectural plans, all of that stuff as well if you are building a building. Just so you're aware, if you have any of those costs that you expend prior to the grant as well, they cannot be brought as match. Matching has to be spent within the period of performance as well. So just some clarity on that.
Great. That's great. Thank you.
All right, let's go. Jasmine, have you fixed your audio?
Can you hear me?
We can.
Oh,
Yep.
Awesome. Okay. Thanks so much. All right. Thanks for all that info, Amy. Appreciate it. I have a couple of questions. Are eggs included in the dairy section? That might be an obvious question, but.
Yes.
Yeah, I
Yes.
think so.
Okay.
Gabrielle. Yeah. Okay.
Yes, they are.
Okay.
I got clarity on that yesterday from USDA. They are.
Awesome. Yeah, sometimes it's like broken out and I just didn't see eggs on that list. So, okay. And then to qualify for the 25% match, and that is if you're working with underserved farmers, if I'm correct, what kind of like proof is required for that? I know when I was renewing my unique identifier number, there was like a question that was like woman-owned business and some other things that would have, I guess, put us into that 25% match category. But underserved farmers, or working with underserved farmers, wasn't a part of that. So I'm just wondering how, yeah.
Well, Gabrielle and I just talked about this morning. So on this handout we're going to send out with these links, I really think everyone that may be looking to meet that 25% match for some of the underserved groups that USDA is expecting applicants to meet, to review this section in the USDA program scope and requirements, section 9.1, page 27. So there are a list of definitions of these different groups on this document. And so I really think it'd be important to make sure you read those definitions in detail. In most situations, the applicant needs to have at least 51% either ownership or direct control or direct management if you're a nonprofit board of executives by those groups. And so if you are, for example, a nonprofit food hub, you don't meet those groups, or your board doesn't meet those groups, but you're working with a lot of farmers or companies that are limited resource, veteran-owned, socially disadvantaged, as the USDA describes them, that would not qualify you for that 25%, because it needs to be not who you're serving, but it needs to be the actual applicant itself. So does that make sense?
Yes, that makes sense. So we're just kind of self-declaring then, if that.
Well, okay, and then self-declaring, yes, there are on the application itself, there should be places to indicate that you meet these requirements. As far as I know, Gabrielle, you can chime in here, but as far as I know, they're not asking for specific verification.
No, but you self-certify, it's page, I believe, 6. And as Amy mentioned, it's not who you're serving, it's who owns the company that gets you the graduated match. So go ahead and review those definitions, as Amy pointed out. But you self-certify, and then we will review on the backside whether or not you do meet that match. So the key part about this is if you self-certify that you are indeed eligible for the 25%, but you aren't eligible and you are required to provide 50%, your application would then automatically be ineligible for the program, because you only provided 25% match when you should be providing 50. So make sure that you read the definitions and you understand. If you have any questions, feel free to call me. I'll put my number in the chat. It's also everywhere in all of our contact information for this program. Feel free to give me a call and I can walk you through it. But you are required to have the correct amount of match when you turn your application in. And if you don't, your program will automatically be disqualified and won't even be reviewed because you didn't meet the program requirements. So it's critically important to understand that and to know it's about the business. It's not about the people you serve.
Gotcha. So I'm the director of the Clatskanie Food Hub, and we have a board of directors. So it would be current board of directors and staff, or just board of directors?
Just your board of directors, because
Okay.
they have the direct control of the organization. And so if 51% of your board of directors meets any of these priority groups, then you would qualify for that 25%. But what's important is that you look over the definition of those required groups.
Great, thank you. And then my last question is, can we apply for both tracks? I mean, would that make sense?
You can apply for both tracks. You will only be awarded one grant. Yeah.
I'm just thinking if, like, yeah, to have kind of multiple chances, and if you think maybe we're more qualified for the smaller track, but go for the big track as well. So that's kind of where that thought process came. Okay, that's all the questions that I have. Thanks.
Yeah, I think we encourage people to submit their project ideas, the fullest, most complete project ideas that they have. And I know that can be challenging when there's limited funds, to think about, if you have a high cost project, will that make it through because of the limited funds? But what I think is the most competitive are complete projects. It doesn't mean that they can't be smaller in scale, or larger in scale, either one, but that they are complete. You know, every cost you're requesting is feasible towards the project. It's really clear what your project aims to do and what the outcomes will be, how it's going to build resilience in the middle of the supply chain, and support some of these new and emerging producers that meet the priority groups of the USDA. All right, let's see. Who is next? Let's go to Meredith.
Hi, can you hear me okay?
We can.
Oh, lovely. Hi. I'll turn my camera on. Hi. I had a couple questions, and also thank you everyone who's asked questions, has such great questions that are also some I didn't even think of, so that's great. So my first question had to do with like the self-certification of being the eligibility for reduced matching. So there's no, to clarify, there's no application, like there's no part of the application, it's just indicated. There's no like additional paperwork to apply to that part. It's just if you fall into the requirements or if you meet the requirements, then you are eligible for it. Is that right?
Yeah, there are.
Okay.
Oh, was someone else speaking? I'm going to pull up, I think what I'll do is I'll just quickly pull up the, I'm just going to pull up the application to show you.
Yeah. Yeah.
Meredith,
That was my
while she's
next
doing
question.
that,
Oh, yeah.
while she's doing that, so there is no additional paperwork for applicants who meet the 25% graduated match for self-certification. You still need to fill out the same amount of detail as anyone who would receive the 50% match. So you're good there.
Great. Okay, that's wonderful. Oh, we're so excited. It's going to be so great. Okay, this was one of my questions as well, is I see on like the document I've been looking at is the request for applications PDF
Yes.
that I found on the website, and it has like item 6 has the required paperwork for the application, the procedures and requirements. So it says describe the project in an application proposal template provided by ODA. Is that what you're pulling up right now?
I am, yes.
Okay,
So
how do I find that? Was that what you just clicked on? I was having a really hard time finding the template.
sure. Okay, so if you go to, so if you want, you go to the ODA
Yeah.
RFSI page, right? And at
Yes,
the
I'm
bottom of the
familiar.
page, you'll have to page down through quite a bit of content.
Yeah.
All of the application material is down here. So you see a bullet here that says ODA application. The RFSI infrastructure grant application template is what you want to click on. When you do that, you may get a notice that says through PDF that you're not able to view it. And so what you want to do, and you can follow the instructions here, but you want to download the document to your computer and save it in a file. Okay, so I just simply saved it. Yeah, I just simply saved it to my downloads, and then I went off of the website, off of the server, or not of the server, but off the web page, and open it in a folder, right? You want to open it from your computer. So you need to download it first.
I'm still having a problem. I did download, and it just downloaded the PDF of the message that says that you can't see it. When I did download, like I went, I mean, I can stay on later on this call. This feels very in the weeds, but
Sure.
this is what I was having a little bit of a problem with, but I do have some other questions that aren't quite so technical. Oh, it says Gabrielle said it will become available on February 1st, but is that also for the infrastructure grant?
She's having a conversation about the equipment grant,
which
is
sorry.
separate, and we aren't really covering a lot of those details today.
Got it. Sorry.
So this is what the application looks like, Meredith.
Sure.
And then I think people had
questions. This is what I've been looking for.
Yeah, I think people had questions about where they indicate or self-certify that they are from any of those disadvantaged groups. So this is what it will look like. And so under page 6 here,
Got it. I understand.
is where you would certify that you meet these requirements for the reduced 25% match. And it has a list of entities who qualify. So what you want to do here, these are those groups, right? Is you want to look at the program scope and requirements, which is in so going back here to our office links, this section here, determine if you fall under the priority areas, go to this document, read section 9, which is the definitions section, and you will find every one of these groups mentioned in the application defined. And then, and if you have questions about whether you meet that, you can reach out to us and we can walk you through it.
Right
And this
on.
goes for
How
everyone
did you
else
get?
on the call.
Oh, I'm sorry. How did you
Yeah.
get to that links page again, or you were going to send that one out?
Okay, this is a link. This is a resource document with a number of links on it. We're going to send this to everyone on the call today. Just make sure your
Great.
email is in the chat box.
You got it. Okay. I'll try and be speedy. Forgive me if this is such a silly question, but the allocation,
No
like
silly
the awards,
questions.
the range of awards from I think 100,000 to 2 million, that is per business, correct? That's not the total allotted, or
The-
like it.
That is the total allotted is $2.8 million. ODA is
Per-
accepting applications up to $2 million. I think,
Oh, got it.
However, if you are an individual business and your
Mhm.
project will only impact your business and it won't
Yep.
necessarily help support other businesses or farms, it
Mhm.
would likely not to be funded at a $2 million amount.
Okay. Quick follow-up on that then. If, say, we are a women-owned small business, but we work in partnership with, or like we are affiliated with a farm that does not fall under the category of um like the 25% matching. So like if our farm is not women-owned
Mhm.
small business, if it's owned by a man, do we still qualify because our business is women-owned?
If you are, this only applies, this
Mhm.
question on the application only applies to the applicant. None of
Okay.
the potential beneficiaries or
Okay.
farmers that you're serving or working with or collaborating with. So this
Great.
is only for the applicant. Mhm.
Only, yeah. Okay. Not affiliates. Okay. And then, great. I think that this probably will become more clear now that I know where to find this. But in terms of breakdown of budgeting, I saw that that is on either one of the two attachments. But is that also to be discussed in the cover pages or anywhere else?
Do you mean will the budget be discussed in the cover page?
Yeah, like the like nitty-gritty breakdown.
So you do
Amy?
have to,
Meredith, I would suggest you watch the YouTube video.
Okay.
It's going to walk you through every single section of the application, and really give you a
Okay.
breakdown of line by line what you
Okay.
actually need to be doing. I would suggest watching that and then giving Amy or I a call to ask a bunch of these questions. So
Great.
the
How can I give
application training
you a
video
call?
will do that. Yeah, absolutely. I'll put my information again in the chat, but it's here on a couple of other
Great.
pages.
I watched the first half of the video and then I couldn't find the application, so I wasn't able to be walked through that part of it, but thank you so much. This is so helpful.
yeah,
I
let's
think,
make sure
oh,
you can get the let's make sure you can
yeah.
get the application.
Yeah.
So yeah, please
And one
connect with
final quick
Gabrielle or
question.
myself.
Definitely. One final quick question is, I saw somewhere in the literature that it's possible to be connected with like a grant writing assistance, like through ODA or something like that. Is that, or would it be better to just speak with one of you individually?
I think, why don't you, Meredith, why don't you reach out to me? This is Amy. I have a number of organizations I can help put you in touch with related to
Great.
grant writing.
Fabulous. Thanks for so much of your
And-
time. Oh,
Yeah. No worries. I'll just
Thank
put
you.
my email address here in the chat box.
Great. Thank you. Thank you. Okay.
Okay. All right. And we'll make sure that you get that, the application correctly too. Okay. Yana, do you have questions? Oh, sorry. Who was that?
That's Gabrielle. Sorry, one quick thing. Amy, do you want to send the application out via email to anyone who puts their email in the chat? That way they have it. I've been hearing a lot of download issues, so we can always do that.
Let's do that. Sure.
Okay. That way
If
Meredith,
you-
you'll get it and everyone else will get it.
We'll just send it
Thank you
out
so
with
much.
the we'll send it out with this resource document with the links and then the office hours presentation slides. So we'll just include it on that. All right, Yana, do you have questions?
I do. I have a few questions. The first one is that question that you said we could answer. So we are a food hub that does handle meat, poultry, and wild caught seafood, but also all of those other things as well. And so you said there were some specifics about if we're kind of a mixed family, like what do we do with that?
Yeah.
So that's one question. And then I have two questions about the matching funds. One is, does it need to already be in hand, all of it, or firmly committed, or can we, like on grant applications, we can often list, we're applying all of these places. And is the match just for your portion of it? Like if we have a $3.2 million project and we're asking you for 600,000 of it, are we matching, are we expected to have 300,000 or 1.6 million?
Okay. So let's go to your first question. So for those of you that have mixed operations that are handling meat, poultry, wild caught seafood, or other ineligible products, what we are asking you to do is to the best estimate you can, determine the percentage of the activities or processes of the project that would be dedicated for the allowable products. So what percentage of time, what percentage of processing, what percentage of space in any storage or cold storage, what percentage of that space is for those eligible products. I know that's difficult to do, but come up with your best estimate of that. And that is the portion of the project that the grant dollars can cover.
Okay, great. That is very clear. Thank you.
And then related to that with the matching, so a couple things about the matching and good questions that you asked. So for in-kind match and for cash match, so any match you're going to use towards the project has to be secured before the project starts. So if you already have a facility or some pieces of infrastructure that you're going to be using that are allowable under the purpose of this grant, and you want to use those as in-kind, you can do that. So it can be a depreciated value of some existing equipment you already have, or maybe you already own a facility or building, or even if you're renting that building, that rent can be used as in-kind. For cash match, or I should say also if you're going to have any labor, or maybe you have some contractual services that are going to be used towards match as a proposed part of your project, those could also be used as in-kind. For the cash match, that all has to be something that you do during your grant. So if you have applications out there that you haven't secured funding for yet, those would not be allowed to be used towards your match requirements. So it must be cash or some sort of, maybe if you have another grant that you already have, a loan or other basic liquid capital that you're using, that could be used as cash match, but you have to have it secured when your project starts.
Okay, so the cash, sorry, you said I thought you said at the beginning that it needs to be secured by the time that we make the application, and then it sounded like it needs to be secured by the time we start for cash.
Oh, I'm sorry. By the time you by the time you apply. Sorry.
So by the end of February, we need to have everything lined up. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. And you said this is just going to be a one-time thing, so we basically just have one shot at this.
As far as we know, these are federal dollars. We don't know that there's more funding coming. This is all that we know of right now.
Okay. And then that third part of that match question was whether we need to be meeting the match for the part that this program is going to be providing, or for the full project. So it needs to be 50%.
You need to 50% of what you're requesting from ODA would need to be matched. So you would be far exceeding your match with the total cost that you told me was over what, $3 million. So yeah, you'd only need to meet the match for 50% of what you're requesting from ODA.
Okay, perfect. All right, thanks. Those are my questions.
All right. If you need more clarity on that, I know that's kind of confusing, both with the match and some of the unallowable products and how people are using those in their projects. Just reach out. Other questions?
I can ask one more if there
Sure.
isn't somebody else queued up. So I'm wondering, so we have $2.8 million for the whole state. I know there's a lot of really good stuff happening in this state, and so trying to figure out how much to ask for feels a little bit tricky if we care about the system as a whole. And I'm wondering if there's anywhere in here where we can indicate, like, so we're asking for $700,000, but $200,000 would also be valuable to our project budget. Like, can we indicate that somehow so that, like, if partial funding would be helpful, I guess, for the project?
Yeah, so partial funding would be is allowable, and maybe it may be that partial funding is awarded for some of these projects. In that instance where partial funding would be offered, applicants would have a chance to revise their proposals to adjust the scale if that were necessary, especially for some of these infrastructure projects that have multiple elements to them. And it's really hard for us to say whether or not that would be likely, because obviously it's going to depend on the entire pool of applications we receive, the competitiveness of them, the distribution around the state of where some of these projects may be prioritized. So I think, what I generally give people guidance on is to submit your best proposal for what you need. And that's really, I think, the best that everyone can do. I think if everybody does that, and again, you can submit one for the equipment grant too if you have a smaller project idea or a smaller ask. But again, you'd only be awarded in one track or the other. And I know that's a little, challenging to conceptually to really kind of wrap your brain around. But that's really the best we can do with the parameters that we've been given by USDA.
Great, thanks. That's helpful.
I have a quick follow-up question to that, if it's okay. So just curious, so if we, is it necessary to then indicate whether or not partial funding would be helpful, or partial funding may be offered if the proposal is really great, but maybe not that amount is not possible? Like, do we need to indicate explicitly anywhere, or will partial funding be offered if the proposal is good enough, type of thing?
Amy, I can take this one. So partial funding is not something we normally do with a lot of our federal dollars. It is something that we reserve the right to do. However, we do like to fund full projects because we understand that the depth and breadth of what the work that you've put into the application to that point, you deem necessary for the work of the grant. So we see it as necessary.
Okay.
If we do any partial funding, we will indicate to you that like your grant ranked high. We really want to fund you, but we only have X amount of dollars left. We want you to do this portion of your application. So we will indicate that to you. And we partial funding, you guys don't need to add a note in your grant that 200,000 would be fine, even if you're asking for 700,000, because to us, that indicates that you're overspending somewhere. And you're telling
Right.
us, oh, we're asking for 700,000, but we could do it for 2. And that
Yeah,
is
yeah,
going
totally.
to show that your application is weak. So in
Yeah.
order, if you're going to truly do a $200,000 application and that is what you need, please only ask for 200,000.
Yes.
If your application is actually needs 700,000, please ask for 700,000.
Okay.
You don't need to indicate that the lower amount would be fine. We will reach out to you and ask you if a lower amount will be fine if your application ranks high enough.
Okay. Fabulous. Thank you. That's perfect answer.
I think there was a question about, I don't know if it got answered, but it was related to whether in-kind or cash match, can it be one or the other? And there is no cash match requirement for this grant, so the match could only be, in kind or cash or both. But there's no requirement that there is cash match. So I did just want to make that clear. Yana, you have your hand up. Do you have a question?
Sorry, I just didn't take my hand down. I'm not sure how to do that in this format.
Oh, okay. We'll just, I think we can do that for you. Anyone else have questions at this point? I'm going to leave the line open just for another. We have till 12:30 if we need it. I think some people are jumping off, but if people have questions, please feel free to ask.
Well,
Christy.
Yana's on the call. Hi. Since Yana's on the call too, those of us who will be applying for the Oregon State Legislature funding for Food Hub infrastructure, that was my question, Gabrielle. I thought I heard both answers. I thought I heard you say no, and Gabrielle says yes in the chat of could the Oregon funds count as a match?
They should be able to, you mean for the, when you say the legislature infrastructure funds, do you mean from the OCFSN funds?
Yes.
Yeah, those are state dollars, so those would be a qualified, you could use those as match. That's true.
Okay, even if we're just, because we won't know, it'll just be something that we will have applied for, so we won't know if we have those or not. We'll apply for this.
Yeah, they need to, if it's going to be used as cash match, which it would be in this case, because it would be income, you would need to have it secured when you apply.
So then it won't count because we won't know yet.
It doesn't sound like it, unfortunately. When are those applications going to be determined?
Well, submit, I think it's around the same time frame as far as submitting, and I think we hear in April or something.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and Jasmine too. Okay. So maybe I don't know if this would be helpful to everybody else, and if not, I can let this go for now. But maybe more conversation about what does constitute a match. this whole notion that it has to be lined up, but not, you can't have spent it already, seems awfully tricky to me. I haven't done a lot of grant applications because I have a for-profit. So maybe those of you with a nonprofit might think this is not a big deal, and you can tell me so that I don't think it's a big deal either. But I'm trying to figure out how to balance getting something lined up, but not having purchased it or whatever.
So if you, okay. And I'm getting some feedback. Maybe, I'm just gonna mute everybody again here. Well, looks like everybody's muted. Okay, so let's break them apart, okay? So cash match. Cash is cash, right? It's actually, you can physically see it. You have it available. It's in your accounts, it's in your checking account, it's in your business account, and you can access it, you can use it. So it can be something that exists. It's something that can come from different sources. It can come from grants, it can come from donations, it can come from a loan, but it's essentially cash, liquid that you have on hand during your project that you can use towards contributing to your project. So if you're going to buy something that you need for your project, you can use it with those cash funds, right? So it's basically money exchanging hands for a goods or services, right?
Yeah, I know it
So-
cash. But so it could be a grant, but it has to be a grant that you've already received.
Has to be, right. And it
Sitting
can
in
only
your-
be, can't be a federal, what we know is that it can't be a federally sourced grant
Okay.
fund.
So basically, you just have to have a fat bank account if you want to do a cash match. Yes?
Yeah, if you want to use some of your, if you want to use cash match, which again, you don't have to,
Right. I just
but it
thought
would have,
what was possible there. Okay. And can you do a split between cash and in kind?
yes.
Okay.
And you can do only in-kind match,
Okay.
which would include anything that doesn't exchange hands. So if you have an existing facility that you already are using and you're renting that facility, or maybe you own that facility, but if you're renting it, you can use the value of that rent towards the in-kind match. You can use the depreciated value of that facility or equipment as in-kind match. You can use your personal labor or someone else's labor as in-kind match. You can also use, say you need contracted services for something. Maybe someone's going to consult on the design of your project, or maybe someone's going to do some of the installation or construction of it. And maybe they would be willing to donate some time, maybe a portion of it. That could be used as in-kind match.
But so paying them is not match, but if they donate it, it's match.
Paying them can be match. Yep.
Oh, okay. So they
It
don't
can
have
be
to
cash match. It can be if you're paying for a service, if you're paying for some portion of their service, but they're going to donate some of it, it'd be used that you could use it as both. Those are dollars you're not requesting. The cash is what you're not requesting from the state.
So if you pay someone to provide a service, that's considered cash match.
Yeah, when there's money exchanging hands.
Well, you said rent, and money exchanges hands when there's rent.
Well, overhead is, the overhead is a little different because that's ongoing. That's not something you're necessarily paying directly for with the grant dollars, but you can use overhead towards your match, your in-kind match.
Okay. This is very intriguing. Thank you.
Yeah. We learn a lot about match every time. Okay, are there more questions? Okay.
Well, that's a cool point that Gabrielle just made, that the match period starts January 1st. Is that what I'm understanding here?
No.
Oh,
That was the application open January 1st. So you have 8 weeks to apply to it. Your matching will start the day that your grant starts. So we're hoping August, but it could be later or earlier based on USDA review. So your matching cannot be spent before your period of performance starts, but it needs to be secured by the end of February so you can provide match verification documentation in your application.
okay. I keep getting muted. Do you not want me to speak, or may I speak?
No, you can speak. We're just getting a lot of feedback when you have your mic on
Oh,
and you're not speaking. That's all.
oh, weird. Oh, sorry. There's no sound here. Okay, so that makes sense. So then maybe the just for Jasmine and Yana, then maybe the Oregon grant will count as match if it doesn't, if the clock doesn't start until August. I can't remember what the timeline on the other one is.
No, Christy, because we're not going to get our like verification that we actually got it. So we can't like put it in our application. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think that's problematic. It's so the way USDA, right, it has to be something that's already secured. So when you fill out those matching requirement, when you fill out that matching template, you've got to agree that these funds, either the funds or the in-kind support it's already committed, it's already agreed upon. So unfortunately, if the timing of the disaster relief or I don't remember what they're calling it now, but the OCFSN grant is beyond that, even though you have an application in, or maybe you have a foundation grant application in, because those dollars are not yet secured by your organization, you can't technically use it. According to USDA, can't technically use it.
We have to have money now and not touch it until August. That's no problem.
Well, yeah, I mean, you don't have to use cash as your match, right? And because cash flow is different seasonally for a lot of you, that might be more challenging. So maybe focusing on, the in-kind costs, because the labor, if you're going to do any of the labor of your project, all of that labor can be used to meet that match requirement. If you have, think about all the existing infrastructure you do have right now that you would use towards your project, right? That can be used towards your match. So, if there's cash, yeah, I think, cash is always problematic for under-resourced organizations and businesses in this area. So just remember that they're not requiring a cash match. In fact, I would recommend those of you that are really having challenges with this to first go through the in-kind match scenario that you might have. There is one to calculate depreciation. I don't know if Gabrielle knows that off the top of her head, but I can help you find it if Gabrielle doesn't know. Yeah, I have never heard of USDA allowing proposed match that hasn't been secured. So I'm really surprised to hear that. They've always, I mean, I've worked with a lot of USDA grants. They've always required the match to be secured by the time you submit an application. Okay, are there more questions? Have we missed any questions in the chat box?
I have a question. This is Jasmine.
Uh-huh.
If there's nobody else, am I good? Okay. So I'm having a problem like with the permitting timeline in my head because I have So like for one of my match opportunities, I have a plumber donating his services and I have my plumbing permit, but that permit's going to expire. And like he wouldn't be, and I'm not allowed, if I use him as matching, I can't use those funds before the grant period starts, right? And like a permit generally lasts for 6 months, and then you would have to pay to have that renewed. And so maybe this is also getting into the weeds, I'm sorry if so, but like that just seems difficult to me to show proof of permit with such a long timeline here and not being able to start work before this application
Well,
gets approved.
some of the project work, again, your project work can start. We just can't pay for it if it starts before your grant is if it starts before your grant starts, that's okay.
But we also
But-
can't use it as matching funds. That's the problem that I'm having.
If it's existing infrastructure, that you
So-
already will have installed, you can, as long as it relates to your project. The permit, the cost of the plumbing, if you have to get a plumber to fix something, if that can't wait until your project starts, then any of that labor you could not use towards the match. And maybe
again-
with your, oh, sorry, someone speaking?
Yeah, it's Gabrielle. Jasmine, again, the cost of the permit can be brought in the grant. So you can tell the grant, my permit, I have one, but it's going to end before the grant starts. We need to renew it in order to do this work. Then you can ask the grant to pay for the permit. Or if you renew the permit after the grant starts, you can bring that as matching costs to the grant as well as the plumber's time. If the plumber goes in and does any infrastructure work, you cannot bring his time prior to the grant starting. You cannot bring his time as matching, but you can bring, if you have like a building on site, you can say, we're going to use that building for like a processing line or a aggregation hub. You can say, we're going to use that building throughout the life of the grant. We're going to bring the rental costs for the life of the grant in as matching, or the use of a production line or whatever. But you can't, if you do any work prior to the grant award starting, you cannot bring that as match, and you cannot tell us as the grant that we have to pay for anything that happens before the period of performance starts.
Okay.
Yeah, so I mean, you can project out if you have expenses related to those permit costs that are going to happen in 2024, 2025, after this grant is anticipated to start, you can put those in your budget and request funding from us that we can help pay for those. It's just nothing you can't propose anything that's already happening right now that you're paying for or that someone's helping support you with labor costs. Nothing right now that's happening with your project or with what you're proposing to be, you're going to expand this, right? Or you have a vision for this project. Can't be brought as match later.
Okay. Thank you.
We could also, we could have, if people really feel like please just call us with questions about match. Or we can also set up another call this just only for matching. But I do just really want to emphasize that a lot of you have in-kind, a lot of you have existing facilities and infrastructure. Like Gabrielle was saying, you have processing line, production lines, you have, you're already packaging materials, you have lifts, you have pallets, you have all of these things that you're doing in your hub operations that you can use towards your in-kind match, right? And you don't need to have cash match if that's problematic. They're not requiring that.
Thank you.
No worries. We have interlopers on these calls all the time. You're
One more-
not crashing. Go ahead.
One more clarification. So you did say that this money will be dispersed, so it's not just reimbursement. So we don't have to have this upfront, just to clarify.
Right. So if your project is selected after your contract's fully executed with ODA, you would get an initial disbursement of 50% of your requested funds. And then after submitting a progress report and an expense workbook, and I think, I don't know what else, the reports, basically those quarterly, or I don't know if they're going to be every quarter or every year, but you would submit the required materials to ODA, and then you would get an additional 25% of your funds as a disbursement. It may, just depending on your cash flow, that 25%, may act as a reimbursement. It's just going to really depend on you as an individual business. But yes, they will be, the first two will be disbursements of funding. And then the remaining 25% will be after the project is at the end of the project. So that one may be more like a traditional reimbursement.
And that all, again, this is Gabrielle here. That all actually depends on your graduated match amount. So if you are matching 25%, you receive 75% of your total grant or of your grant award. And then for both program, and we hold back the last 10% for final until your final report is submitted, and then we'll release it. The remaining amount between 75 and the last 10% or 50 and the last 10% gets split into two payments based on when you turn in your reports and financial reports. So we'll go into more depth about all of that when you become an applicant, or when you become an awardee.
Thank you.
PC, do you have a question?
I do, just real quick. If we're proposing a multi-use facility, I know you talked about this a little bit before, but both processing and retail, of the processed goods, that the retail portion, could that be included in the grant request?
What do you mean by the retail portion? Like the cost related to getting the products to retail?
More like it would be a point of sale location, so it would be both processing facility and a sales facility. I guess I'm just asking, is the retail portion coverable by the grant? If it's all for, local food products that meet
Yeah.
the requirement.
Can you give, I think for the actual sales of the product, it would not be. So the funds are focused on the middle of the supply chain. So getting it to the end consumer, getting it to the retailer would be where that would stop. So if there's something that you're proposing to do in the retail location or building, that would be post middle of the supply chain.
Okay, we would be the endpoint as well. I mean, we'd be the retailer as well as the processor is the kind of the intent. So that what you're saying makes sense. We just have to focus on the processing side of the equation.
Yeah, I mean, if you were gonna ask for funding to, I don't know, build out an end cap or some sort of marketing or promotional aspect of the product that you have added value to and you've done in the processing side of things, those types of expenses would not be covered.
Okay.
But if so everything related to developing the value added product, as long as it's an eligible product, the equipment you would need, the infrastructure, for sourcing the ingredients, aggregating them, minimally processing them or further processing them, the packaging, all of that, the labeling, et cetera, would be allowable.
Okay, that makes sense. Thank you. I guess following on that, again, it'd be a shared space, so we would exclude that in our square footage calculations, I presume, and present that in the grant application.
Related to the non-eligible products like seafood or?
No, more related to the non-eligible activity. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. Great. Thank you.
Yeah, so essentially the funding that, all of these funds are focused on the middle of the supply chain. So once the product is distributed to its end location for sale, any activities that would be necessary at that sale point or the point of sale would not be allowable expenses. So when you think about the middle of the supply chain, you want to think about those categories of everything once the product leaves the farm or once it leaves the field, everything from that point until it gets to the point of sale. So that's the middle of the supply chain. So aggregating product, processing it, washing it, chopping it, whatever you need to do to make the value added product you're making, storing it in cold storage or otherwise, and then packaging it, moving it from location to location. This grant also covers some of those transportation items like a refrigerated vehicle to get that product from the processing center or the warehouse to that retail point, or that wholesaler or wherever the product is going to end. So, but everything post that would not be allowable under the grant.
That's really helpful, Amy. Thank you.
All right. Any last questions before we wrap up the call?
I did just want to, I was going to email you, Amy, either sometime today or next week. I've got to sort of gather my thoughts about it. But is there a time that works best for phone calls, Gabrielle? Thank you so much for putting your phone number in the chat. That's so generous.
Are you talking to me, Meredith, Amy, or Gabrielle?
But I was just saying, Amy, I'm going to email you and thank you for your email, but I just saw Gabrielle's phone number in the chat. So I was curious. I just wanted to acknowledge both of you and say thank you, but I was curious when is a good time to talk on the phone?
Feel free to give me a call at any time. If I don't get back to you within 24, 48 hours, give me another call. I try to answer my phone when it rings, but sometimes, I'm on the other line. So I try to get back to you quickly. So feel free anytime you're open.
Great. Next week is Oregon Cider Week, and we've got our work cut out for us, but I would love to have a time to talk the following week. I'm looking forward to it.
Great. Okay, let's go ahead and end the call. I'm going to stop recording here. And then Gabrielle, can you hang on just for 1 minute?
Sure.